Well, good morning. It's 5 degrees today. That's why I'm got a bit more insulation on. And a bit overcast, not like a few days ago when we had beautiful sunshine, blue skies. But as I'm walking here this morning, I'm just reflecting on the video that I did about the Pointe-a-Pierre Swansong, and quite a lot of feedback on that. A lot of people sharing their memories. And that's the kind of thing that I like to get as a feedback, because it also allows me to make further notes and to put all that feedback into a storage somewhere, a database, where I can then call upon it for future research and future videos, future posts, etc. Maybe one day, who knows, maybe someone will decide to write a book and I may be able to help them, or maybe even I might do something on Pointe-a-Pierre. I don't know. I mean, my interest is really railways, but coming from the oil industry as I have, I'm also interested in aspects of the oil industry. And today I've seen a lot of posts about the possible reopening of Pointe-a-Pierre Refinery, which I look at and find very interesting indeed, seeing as we allowed the refinery to become obsolete, and then it got out of hand, became unprofitable, and went into decline in 2018. Now, lots of reasons for that. I don't want to get into all the reasons. I mean, that's all water under the bridge. But I'm looking at, it would be greatly beneficial to Trinidad and Tobago and the population, especially of San Fernando and the south, for the refinery to be brought back into operation. If that could happen, it's going to have to be very carefully looked at, and I'm no expert, but we have to remember that we were running out of oil in Trinidad a very long time ago. In the 50s there was efforts to go offshore, and yes, that added to it. I think Trinidad at its peak must have produced about 260,000 barrels a day. And what one starts to realize is that the refinery at its peak was able to refine about 360,000 barrels a day. So it's quite obvious that under Texaco, when the refinery was modernized, a lot of money pumped into it, and a lot of technical expertise and so forth, they brought it up to that capacity. But some of the oil was coming from elsewhere. A lot of the oil was coming in by tanker through the Texaco worldwide network and coming in to Trinidad. I mean, as a kid, I used to look out of my window at home in San Fernando. Actually, we moved to Laramane after living at 48 2nd Street in St. Joseph Village. And from Laramane, it was quite clear the number of tankers that were awaiting their turn to come alongside at Pointe-a-Pierre and discharge their oil to be refined, and at the same time taking away products that had been refined and produced at Pointe-a-Pierre, at that time a world-class operation, and shipped overseas. So you had tankers from all over the place. It's quite impressive, the list of tankers that came into there. You could do a whole book on the marine history of Pointe-a-Pierre, and I'm sure somebody, I'm taking my time here because watch what's going on. We had a lot of rain overnight and it's quite muddy, so I'm going downhill. I got to take care. So yes, a complete history of the marine operations at Pointe-a-Pierre is something that I posted about in the past, and it's something that's of great interest to many people. It's not my area of expertise, as I say, but just by the fact that there are so many accounts of quite incredible things that took place there. It's a great interest to me from an engineering point of view. But getting back to the refinery, what would it take? What would it take to reopen that refinery? Well, I think it's going to take a lot of money. And it's money that will not and cannot come from the taxpayer. I don't think there's enough money. And then, of course, we don't have the oil anymore. I think Trinidad perhaps now is producing, I think it's under 50,000 barrels a day. It could even be less. I don't think those figures are very accurate. I think it could be less than 50,000 barrels a day. Maybe somebody can correct me. I mean, I've been out of the industry now for 10 years, so I'm not really an expert anymore in the industry of oil in Trinidad. But the refinery was a fantastic refinery and huge. And it would take, I think, a major international oil company and some solid commitment to bring it back, or to bring a company in that could start investing and could start building back the refinery. And with today's politics and the situation going on, I think Pointe-a-Pierre Refinery is well situated, where we are an island and ships can come in from all places in the world to bring charged stock or oil, crude oil. And we have a camp there that could be brought back. You're going to need to have an expatriate camp. There's no doubt about it. Even today, with the number of houses that we have, and I think there still will be a housing shortage. So you would need to have the experts in one place. They would have to be safe. They would have to come in. But at the same time, there would need to be negotiations that include the benefit of the workers and the people who are employed in the refinery. They would have to come from the local area. And those people would have to be well taken care of. And there may be a certain amount of legacy for ex-workers. Can't forget those people who were there before. But there would still have to be a very tight control and collective agreement between the government, the workers, and whichever company decides to come in, or whoever's coming in, so that these things would be... Hold on, a car coming. So that these things would be properly undertaken, proper agreements that are agreed by both parties and stuck to. Because you can't just have costs spiraling out of control, strikes and all those type of things, because the margins are not going to be as before. The margins will certainly be much tighter, and there'll be a strong emphasis on production, efficiency. All of these things have to be part of the agreement. We don't have oil anymore to make it attractive for these companies to come in. Yes, we have gas and we have a few things offshore, but you have to remember that drilling on land is a completely different story to drilling offshore. I remember back in the day when a land rig, a very small land rig, might cost, who knows, 9,000, 10,000 a day for that operation. Probably more now. I'm talking back 15, 20 years ago. Maybe now it's like 50,000 a day. Offshore platform, depending on the depth of water, could be 2 million a day. It's the contrast in pricing and the contrast in cost is great, and we just simply do not have the amount of oil and gas that's going to really attract, without a good agreement, a company to come in and take over that refinery. And we would have to give them concessions. We'd have to allow them to export tax incentives to begin with, to get it all set back up again. But once it's set up, once it's running, once it's profitable, then we also have to have continued agreement between the government, the unions and the company, and they have to be solid agreements. It cannot just be a case of, okay boys, we're down in tools. I mean, I watched Texaco decline, and I can give you stories when I was in the oil industry, showing up to rigs to perform a service. In those days, I was a directional drilling engineer. Used to go out there and deviate the wells. And I can tell you stories of going to Texaco and the total and utter inefficiency of what used to be the best workers in the oil industry, because many people told me in the early days the Texaco workers were some of the best, the fastest drilling crews. They really were the best. But then you had the union creeping in, and somehow these guys were convinced that they had to go on strike and they had to shut down operations, and all of this incurred huge losses. So the company continued with its commitment, but why couldn't we have an agreement? There needs to be flexibility on both sides, because you can't operate without workers, and the workers can't operate without vast amounts of cash injection and investment in a place like Trinidad and Tobago. So all of these things that need to be thought about. And could it happen? Yeah, of course it could. But the refinery would have to be upgraded, modernized, because that refinery right now is so far behind that nothing there is going to be able to produce the type of fuel that's necessary, the type of products that are necessary in today's modern world. I think it's going to be a great benefit, if it ever happens, to have that refinery back up and running again in a modern form. But it's going to take some real courage, some real dedication by the heads of the union and whatever union is formed to represent workers, to find a way to work with the different companies. This is what I love to see on a morning walk. I'm walking through farmland here. It's really beautiful. As far as you can see, with the spring coming, all the lambs are coming out, sheep in the field. Beautiful. Anyway, coming back to it, it's going to take some very, very impressive union people, impressive head of the workers, whatever it is, the union or the personnel department, whatever, to be able to work with companies and to convince such companies that there will be a change in how things are done. A lot of the companies are going to look at the legacy. They're going to look at what happened. They're going to watch very closely at all the things that took place and how the industry, and especially the refinery, went into decline, and the part that was played by the continued strikes and the inability to get an agreement between workers and government and the company itself, or companies, because it might not be one company, might end up having a collaboration between a few companies. And the size of the investment that is going to be required to bring a refinery back online at that point in Pointe-a-Pierre is, it may well be that one company will not make that commitment. It may well be that it will take a couple of companies coming together, looking at ways they can bring oil from other places in the world safely into an area that's relatively calm and doesn't have too much. Okay, we had recent problems with Venezuela, but I think that may have been resolved now. So yes, for the most part, we are in a peaceful zone of the earth across the globe. So it would be a great place to have a refinery that could be for the benefit not only of Trinidad and Tobago, but for the benefit of the world, where products can be shipped directly to the markets without having to go through different tax zones and so forth. So it's worth thinking about, and it's going to be up to the workers, because at the end of the day, the workers are going to be a very important component, and everybody has to remember that.